To other matters just for the Mo. A murderer who has spent 30 years in jail, refusing to reveal the location of his victim's body, has been allowed out of jail on temporary release, according to a newspaper report. Ian Sims, from Merseyside, was found guilty of the murder of 22-year-old Helen McCourt in February 1988. He's now 62 years of age. He abducted McCourt as she returned home from work and he killed her, and he has been spotted out and about. Now, should people be out on temporary release? Should they be able to get out of prison at all until they have said where the body is buried? This is called Helen's Law, and I think it's been agreed that it would be a good idea, but it has not been enacted into law yet. What about the relatives of the girl who was murdered? What about the sensitivities around that? And Marie McCourt, who's been running a Helen's Law campaign, she wasn't told about Ian Sims' release at all, and she should have been, I would have thought. Let's take the view of an old friend of this programme, Joseph Kotrie-Monson, criminal defence lawyer at Monson Solicitors on Fleet Street, who specialises in serious criminal offences. Hello, Joseph.
Nice to speak to you again, Andrew.
Very nice to speak with you also. Now, what do you make of Helen's Law and this specific case?
Well, the specific case, I mean, it's very challenging, isn't it? It's an awful case. The victim's body to this day never returned to the family. The sentence 30 years ago, you're right, was passed for murder. Sims hasn't to this day admitted the offence, and that's kind of intertwined with the refusal to give up the body as the decisions that he's made, which have probably been critical to the parole board, not trusting to release him until really double the 16 years minimum of his original sentence. And it's probably worth saying this because fortunately most of the people listening to this, thank God me myself, have never lost a loved one to violence. But for a family not being able to bury a loved one is in itself a great and continuing grief. I think it's recorded in our culture probably as far as King Priam in the Odyssey. You know, the continual denial of Mr. Sims as to his actions causes that grief to be continually unresolved. But that's the one part of the argument, isn't it? And when we're trying to examine what the considerations here are, it's probably worth saying that our laws don't punish that wrong with a life means life sentence currently.
Should the Ministry of... Sorry to interject, Joe. Ministry of Justice, they should have let the family know and mum that this bloke was out, shouldn't they? Is that not an obligation under law?
There should be somebody at the police, the CPS, who has this properly marked. But we all know that those are two institutions that are in complete chaos, Andrew. The rising knife crime that apparently isn't to do with police numbers, come on, the public aren't that stupid. The fact that there are fewer cases coming through the Crown Court than ever before, the whole thing is a mess, and people need to recognise that this, we're getting into politics now, but this idea that austerity isn't hurting law and order, safety, and the proper functioning of our judicial systems.
But the problem on this particular case of Helen's Law, Joe, the murderers could easily lie about their victims' whereabouts if they were only to be granted parole if they said where the body was.
That's been said in the past, but of course, if the victim is no longer there, then one would assume that if there was such a law, that it would be constructed on the basis that it led to the recovery. Of course, they could say they're there and then they're disappeared or whatever. Yeah. I mean, this is a challenge, Andrew, because you get a life sentence for murder with a minimum recommendation. In that case, it was 16 years. Under the current legislation, it would be more like typically 25 to 30 for such a horrific case. Now, however odious that secondary crime of concealment, thinking through to what the consequences would be just for the concealment, which of course is very, very serious, but not as serious as the murder, you could end up giving a separate whole life term. I think that, there's a there's a question there as to whether that's proportionate, even though we're incredibly angry about it.
Joseph, I must leave you. Time is against us. It's good to speak with you again. Have a great Sunday. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Joseph Kotrie-Monson is a criminal defence lawyer at Monson Solicitors.